Hello, in this video I'm going to show you how to make idli dosa batter. So I make just one batter for both idli and dosa. The idlis come out very soft and spongy and nice and big as well. And the dosas come out quite crispy, golden, a lovely color to the dosas. So I have a number of tips, to share so that making idli dosa becomes less hassle, and you can also make fresh batter at home just like how I do. Although you do get batters these days in packets, I am not entirely sure how hygienic they are or how good they are and how free from additives they are, and I like to know where my food is coming from, and as far as possible I try and avoid the processed food. So I thought I'll share these tips with you. Living in a cold country, it can be quite difficult for you to get the batter to ferment, and I've seen a number of my friends who struggle to get their batter to ferment. So I'm going to share a few tips that will help in that as well. So to get started with the main proportions, I use 1:4 ratio. So 1 urad dal and 4 idli rice. So I specifically use idli rice. I do not use raw rice. Although back in the days raw rice were used, generally raw rice tends to produce harder idlis than idli rice. So idli rice is actually parboiled rice. So with the husk itself, it has been boiled to a certain degree, and then the husk is removed. So it is nutritionally also more superior to the raw rice. So you get it from in the Indian shops. 4 cups. If I take 4 cups, then I take 1 cup of urad dal. Again, back in the days, it was quite common for people to use the whole black urad dal. Now that is entirely up to you. If you do that, you would get a dark, dull colored idli, and dosas will also be off color, but in terms of taste and flavor, it will be great. I use broken urad dal. You could use whole urad dal, which has been skinned as well. So without the skin, you can use the urad dal. So with the urad dal, I soak about a spoon of methi seeds. Now, I do not always use 1 cup and 4 cup. The ratio remains the same, but the quantity I vary depending on how the week goes, and if we are going to travel, then I make less of it and so on. So just maintain the proportion and you'll get good results. So I add about a spoon of methi seeds or fenugreek seeds. In Tamil it's called vendayam, to the urad, and try to soak it overnight. I also add to the idli rice a handful of sago or javarasi. So they are the tapioca pearls, as they call it. These help you get nice white idlis and make it softer as well. Now you don't always have to use the sago seeds. You could use poha or beaten rice. Now there is an element of processing in these, as in they are already cooked sort of and then beaten. So that is one of the reasons why they also help with the fermentation. You could add cooked rice. So if you don't have any of these, if you're using cooked rice, you just need less than a handful of cooked rice, and you can add it towards the end when you're grinding the rice. So those are the sort of the additives that you could use to help get a good flavor, good soft texture, crispy texture, as well as aid in the fermentation process. Few other tips with regard to the fermentation is I learned by making a lot of trial and error. So one of the things that I learned was quite interesting about salt. So we all tend to use the cooking salt that is available in the supermarket. However, those salts come with certain other additives which are not everyone tends to read those labels. So one of the additives is like anti-caking agent and so on. Now those do not allow the batter to ferment as well. So always try to use rock salt, so as natural as you can be. So I just buy any rock salt from either Tesco's or any other supermarket or the Indian store, and I add the rock salt. Always remember that the salt has to be added towards the end of the rice grinding process. Now you do not want to add the salt right up front, because that will result in a much harder idli and not so nice dosa as well. So keep the salt to the end. Now we tend to grind urad separately and the rice separately. And again, I did a lot of research to find out why that is the case. So it turns out that back in the days when they used to have the mechanical grinder, because of the quantity or the capacity there, they would do the urad first and then the rice next. Now, what I have understood from experience is that the urad, it is important for you to make it fluffy. So you need to grind it really well until it becomes fluffy. Now imagine you making a cake and you beat the egg, the sugar and the butter together until it's fluffy, and that helps in resulting in a good soft cake. Similarly, the urad's consistency, grinding it really well, is quite important to get very good idli batter as well. Now, once you have ground the urad, now I have a big grinder, so I can add the rice to it and allow it to grind further. That way I don't have to keep emptying the grinders. But if you have a fairly smaller grinder, then you may want to empty the urad, and you don't have to be really strict about that. You don't have to like scrape it to the last bit. You can still add the rice and let it grind. And then the key part is when you mix the idli, when the urad batter with the rice batter, use your hand and make sure during this whole process your hands are really clean. If they're not clean, the wrong type of bacteria are going to enter the batter, and that's not going to look very good. You'll have black mold instead of well fermented batter. So make sure that you use the good old hand to mix the batter. The heat from the body is quite important to get you going, get the fermentation going. Another thing you could add to enhance the fermentation is, if you're really struggling, then you could use a spoon or a ladleful of batter from the previous batch and add it to this batch, so that you just have a starter and you get that acceleration to the fermentation. So I'm quite lucky, I guess. Without much fuss, the batter ferments. I think my body is quite hot, so when I do the mixing, it comes out well fermented. Now, there are alternate ways by which you can do it. So I tend to avoid plastic containers, and for that reason I have a large stainless steel box in which I pour the batter, mix it in nicely, and then I just set it aside. And during winter, just to find a good spot, I keep it near a radiator. I don't always do that. If I do that, that's fine, but if I don't do that, it'll still ferment. So one of the things that you could do is keep it next to a radiator, and if you're doing that, it is recommended that you put in a metal container, because metal will at least get warmed up and it'll keep it warm so that the fermentation happens. Remember that the fermentation needs slightly high temperature, and that's why we struggle in cold weather like how we have here. The other option is, if you have an instant pot, you could use the instant pot's yogurt setting. So put the batter in it, in the pot, or if you want to do pot and pot, depends on how much quantity you have of the batter, put it in it and put it in the yogurt setting, and as long as you can, so 12 hours, or I think 12 hours is the maximum of the instant pot. Now you should be careful with this, because some people have had their batter overflowing as a result of the fermentation, and it goes into the bottom of the electrical parts of the instant pot, and that's not a good idea. You do not want to fill it to that degree, and you want to keep an eye on that if that is the case. So start with less quantity in that. Now, even when I put my batter in a big box, although it has a nice lid, I keep a big plate underneath, so that any spillage happens on the plate and the cleanup is much easier. Now, if you do not have these options, then you could very well switch the lights on in the oven and keep the batter maybe in a glass container, or if you have, again, stainless steel box that will fit into the oven, by all means put it in there, and that heat will also be enough. Now, a number of people panic about how long you can keep the batter out for fermentation. Now I keep it for like 24 hours and nothing wrong happens. It needs that time in this sort of temperature, so 24 hours is all right. My batter will last anywhere between 2 to 3 weeks in my fridge. Now it is important that the rest of the fridge is quite clean, because if there is any mold, rotting vegetables somewhere or something else rotting somewhere, the batter will catch. So you do not want to have an unclean fridge in any case. I don't think anyone likes it anyway. So these are some of my tips to get a well fermented batter. Now I will quickly show you the consistency to which I grind the urad as well as the rice, and then final mixing process as well. So that's my Big Plus Ultra grinder. This is not a sponsored video. I'm not being funded by Ultra to make this video. It's just that I made this choice to buy the Ultra grinder. Now the advantage is that it is quite big, which means it does the job quite quickly. And why that is advantageous is because the less time your batter spends in the grinder, the less heated it will become, and you do not want to get it heated in the process itself. Another important tip is that this fermentation starts right from the time you start soaking it. So make sure that you use the water that you soaked the dal and the rice in. So I have poured that in, and I'm going to get the grinder going once I connect it. So there you go, that's how my urad is starting. We'll get back to it when it is nice and fluffy. So these were the ingredients that I was talking about. So this is methi seeds or fenugreek, vendayam. This is the broken urad dal that I use to make the idli dosa batter. This is poha or beaten rice flakes. Now you get different types of poha. You can get the red rice poha, you can get the medium or the small, it doesn't really matter. And again, the sago seeds or javarasi, tapioca pearls, again you get different size. Anyway, they're all going to be ground, so it doesn't really matter what size you get them. So those are the key ingredients there, which are probably less familiar to people. You can now see how well the urad has been ground. It's a very smooth batter, quite soft to touch. I'm going to empty this into here. Like I said, I don't have to be perfect in emptying this because my grinder has enough capacity to take the rice also with it. But just for purpose of demonstration, I'm just going to do the emptying. Again, using hand is quite a good idea because it, like I said, it helps with the fermentation. While grinding, it is useful to get the spatula to work so that the urad and methi that go on the sides also get ground well. So I've loaded the rice with the tapioca pearls in it. I have saved a bit of the water because I don't want to get started with all that quantity of water. I think it will be a bit too much, but at the same time I've not discarded it because, like I said, it helps fermentation, the water that it's been soaking in. So now I'll get this ground to just about fine consistency, and towards the end I will add salt. The rice is nearly ground. I've added the salt now. I'll just let it go for like a minute so that the big granules of salt just get crushed very briefly. Like I said before, I do not allow it to get heated after the salt has been added. So that's the batter there. I'll put the rice batter also in to the drum, and now there's a urad underneath, so I just need to mix it. Now do not think that your hands are getting messy. This is a very important step to get successful fermentation. So it's one of those, like the midwife used to say, you can't say you're too posh to push. It's just like that. We just got to do this. Get your hands, I wouldn't say dirty, but just full of batter. And then we can rest this so it ferments well. So I'm just about to open the box of the batter. So you can see that it has risen. When I left it yesterday, it was only about half full, just about half full. And now it's already risen to 3/4 of the box. So I will leave it outside for a bit more, and maybe in the morning, which would be about 36 hours from the time I've ground it. And because the night temperature is not that high and our heaters don't work during the night, I will leave it out and it'll be absolutely fine. Um, for those of you who may not have a grinder, a wet grinder, so I just thought I'll share a few tips if you're one of those that doesn't have a wet grinder at home, and if you're going to do it in a blender or mixie as we call it, then follow exactly the same process, but you will have to keep the quantity as low as possible, in the sense, be mindful of the capacity of your mixie. Again, do the urad dal first until it's fluffy, and then do the rice. Another tip is, if you do not have grinder, you might want to use idli rava instead of the parboiled idli rice, because idli rava is obviously quicker to grind. So what I would do if I were using idli rava is, when I'm grinding the urad dal in the mixie, I will soak the idli rava in water. I will just give it a quick rinse and then soak it in water, and until I finish off with the urad, it'll be soaking the water in, and then all I have to do is just give it a grind to the consistency that you want. Some people like their idli a bit grainy, like they call it kappi idli. I quite like that. That's how some of the restaurants serve it, and I quite like that. So if you're one of those, then you don't have to grind it too fine. Whereas if you like it very fine, then go for it. Just go ahead and blend it further. If you think that your mixie is being pushed in capacity, then try to give it a bit of rest rather than overheating it, because the batter is also getting heated if that is the case. So just be mindful, and it's not that it's impossible to do it without a wet grinder, but it is a bit more hassle to do it in a mixie, I would admit that. So hopefully you find this video useful, and you will be able to make your own idli dosa batter in future. Let me know how you get on. Thank you.